What a glorious contrast today's weather conditions at Silverstone are to those of yesterday's practice. Because yesterday, Friday, the first practice sessions were on a track that was awash in water. The rain was beating down, the sky was overcast. It was extremely cold and desperately unpleasant. Despite which, the Frenchman, Christian Saron, the reigning 250cc world champion, on his works Yamaha went round in 1:38.61. That's just about 10 seconds slower than Kenny Roberts' lap record of 119.5 miles an hour, and Saron's speed was 106.85. As you see, the reigning world champion Eddie Lawson also on a Yamaha in second position on the grid at the end of yesterday's practice. Randy Mamola, who's won the British Grand Prix twice on a Suzuki and a Honda, was third fastest yesterday on the new V4 Honda. Ron Haslam, the leading British rider, on a works but three-cylinder Honda, fourth fastest. The man who's leading the World Championship, Freddie Spencer, fifth fastest. Now, Freddie Spencer's leading the World Championship this year. He's got 111 points as a result of 5 victories in the 9 rounds that have been held so far. Eddie Lawson is second. He's the reigning world champion. Saron, the reigning 250 world champion, third. Wayne Gardner, the Australian, a brilliant fourth. It's only his second year of Grand Prix racing. Ron Haslam in fifth position and Randy Mamola in sixth place. And now, in dry conditions, practice for tomorrow's grid, an all-important practice because there is a further one at the end of this later today, and the skies are getting a bit overcast and it could well be that the circuit will be wet. So now let's go round with Freddie Spencer and let's hear from Barry Sheen about the line, speeds and gears at Silverstone.
Well, Freddie's just passing the start and finish now. He'd be in fifth gear, coming down to fourth for Cops. Fourth, up into fifth for a very fast left-hander, Maggots. Up into 140 mile an hour. Then down 2 gears into Beckett's. It's a corner, 120 mile an hour corner. You accelerate out of there. The bike usually wobbles as you change into Chapel Curve. Up into fifth gear, down into the Hangar Straight, where the top speed now comes up to approaching 170 miles an hour. Braking down into fourth for the right-hander, 130, 140 miles an hour, exit. Down into club, fourth gear corner. It's very important, good oh, there, got a bit of a slide on the back, trying to get the power on too early. Up into fifth gear, Abbey Curve, very, very fast, 160 odd mile an hour left-hander. He's coming into the pits now. Yeah, Freddie's coming into the pits now. I saw him coming out of club. He had a bit of a slide on the back there. So maybe the tyre that he's using for qualifying is a little bit on the soft side. So hopefully we'll get some shots of his pit crew.
Freddie Spencer, nevertheless, has gone round in 1:29.36, which is nearly 9 seconds faster than Christian Saron's time yesterday, and 11 seconds faster than Spencer himself went yesterday. 1:29.36 is just 1 second outside the lap record, and we can expect them to go a lot quicker. Now you've seen the man who's leading the World Championship on his Honda 4. Now look at number 1, Eddie Lawson, who, like Spencer, is an American, and he carries the number 1 on his V4 Scarlet Yamaha because he is the reigning world champion. And Silverstone is an absolutely critical race for Lawson, because he must win this to keep his World Championship hopes alive, assuming that Freddie Spencer finishes in the first 12, and it's the 12 positions that give you World Championship scoring points in motorcycle racing. And Lawson is 17 points behind Spencer. Now I'm going to put the stopwatch on the American now. He goes down from Woodcote into Copse, and he's taking number 67 there, who is Trevor Nation, the British rider, on his Suzuki. And you'll be able to compare how, whoops, a bit of a wobble on there as he's flicked the machine upwards, and now he goes into the sweeping left-hander at Maggots on his way down to Beckett's corner, which is the tightest on this very, very fast Silverstone circuit. And I guess, Barry, it's going to be quite a pleasant relief for the riders to be on a really quick sweeping circuit after the much slower ones they've been on thus far.
Well, the last Grand Prix was at Le Mans, and Le Mans is quite a contrast to this, because as you say, Murray, it's Silverstone's a really wide open circuit, and you can have a bike that is a little underpowered here, but if you get the right lines on the corners and make sure that you get in and out of the corners really quick, it's surprising. You can get a pretty good lap time. This racetrack really suits Eddie Lawson. I was talking to him yesterday, and he likes fast open circuits. And it also suits the Yamaha, because the handling of the Yamaha now is very, very good.
And Lawson really feels he's got something to prove, because last year he was world champion, and he was world champion in a situation where people had said he would never be up to his mentor, Kenny Roberts, the brilliant American. Well, Lawson proved them wrong on the same kind of bike that Roberts used to ride, and there are rumours of Kenny Roberts coming back into World Championship racing in 1986, either to ride or as team manager. And this year, of course, Lawson wants to win against his chief rival, Freddie Spencer, his fellow American, riding the Honda. Yet another American, the tremendously fast Randy Mamola, who has won the British Grand Prix twice, 1980 and 1984, on a Suzuki in 1980, on a four-cylinder Honda in 1984, last year. But it's a very different four-cylinder Honda to the one he rode last year. Then the petrol tank was underneath the engine. They had all sorts of handling problems. And now the whole frame and the positioning of the petrol tank and the power characteristics of the engine have been revised. And Mamola has certainly been making the most of it in sixth position in the championship, despite some major problems, one of which was falling off in the Belgian Grand Prix, skinning his little finger, and he's had to have a skin graft and is still in some pain. You overcame that problem by losing your little finger, of course, Barry.
Yeah, I lost my finger a couple of years ago at the French Grand Prix. Now we're looking at Randy Mamola, who's behind Christian Saron on the factory Yamaha. So we've got the two factory four-cylinder bikes, and it'd be really interesting to see the speed differential. I don't know whether Christian actually knows that Randy's behind him, but if he does know that he's behind him, then I think we can be looking forward to some quick practice times. You see there, the Honda's a little bit quicker out of Woodcote. Christian Saron, incidentally, is one of the most incredible breakers in the 500 GPs. Right now, Christian has seen Mamola, and we'll see if he tags along behind. Knowing Christian the way I do, I would think that he'll see if he can follow Mamola and go for a good practice time.
Yes, there'll be a certain amount of sandbagging, of course, because the riders will be watching each other's lines and finding out if there's a quicker way that they can get round the corner. And Mamola's a man with a great deal of experience of Silverstone, and Saron is a man who one must take one's hat off to. He started in 500s. He had a terrible crash in 1980 and damaged one of his legs very badly indeed. Now they're both being balked by some slower riders. And number 3 there is an interesting rider. It's Raymond Roche, the Frenchman, on the Scarlet. There he is on the Scarlet Yamaha. That's a sister machine of Eddie Lawson's. And Roche, the Frenchman, is carrying number 3 because he was 3rd in the World Championship last year on a Honda, and he hasn't really mastered the Yamaha as well as he mastered the Honda last year. And ahead of him now go the Frenchman Christian Saron, who's actually coming into the pits, followed by Randy Mamola as Roche speeds away. And now Roche is with Eddie Lawson. We've got both the Works Yamahas together. 28-year-old Raymond Roche from Toulon, third in the championship last year. And behind him, in the distinctive red leathers, the reigning world champion Eddie Lawson. And tomorrow's race is very much going to be a battle between these two machines, the Works V4's Yamahas and the three V4 Hondas ridden by Mamola, Wayne Gardner and Spencer.
Yeah, that's very much so, Murray, and it's going to be really interesting to find out if there are any team orders, because as you say, Mamola and Gardner now have the four-cylinder Hondas, and I would say it would be a very silly mistake on Honda's behalf if they don't issue some kind of team orders, because if, for example, Gardner beats Spencer across the line and does him out of points, it's I've seen it happen before in other Works teams, so I would imagine there'll be some kind of team order. It looks at the moment as if the two Yamahas are just either scrubbing in brake pads or tyres or something, because they're just riding around looking at one another.
Well, the story now at the moment is that there are no team orders between Spencer, Mamola and Gardner, the three V4 Honda riders. And we mustn't forget also that Ron Haslam is on a Works three-cylinder, that Didier de Radiguez, the Belgian, is also on a Works Honda three-cylinder. But if it is indeed true that there are no Honda Works orders, we can expect a battle royal as Eddie Lawson, now ahead of Raymond Roche, threads his way through the tail enders in this practice period. We can expect a battle royal because Wayne Gardner, who's on a terrific high after having won with his colleague, the Japanese rider, the 8-hour endurance race at Suzuka in Japan last weekend, is very much after his first Grand Prix victory. But back to today, the positions in practice at the present moment are that Freddie Spencer, and there is Wayne Gardner, number 7, on his training T7 four-cylinder Honda, but Freddie Spencer is fastest in practice, 1:29.15, just outside the lap record, in fact, a second outside the lap record. Gardner is second in practice, 1:30.33. Ron Haslam is third fastest, so it's the three Honda Works men, but on very different types of machines. Bert van Dolmen, the Dutchman, is at present in fourth place. I don't think he'll stay there much longer with respect to him. Thierry Espy, the Belgian rider, is in fifth position, and in sixth position is Raymond Roche that we've just been looking at. Here's the leading British rider, Ron Haslam, who has yet to win a Grand Prix. He's won practically everything else. He's won the TT in the Isle of Man. He has been a Formula 3 and Formula 1 world champion. His best position in a Grand Prix this year has been third in the German Grand Prix. He was third here in the British Grand Prix in 1984, and he's fifth in the World Championship. But Haslam, I think, has got little chance of winning tomorrow, unless, of course, it's wet.
Well, yeah, Ron Haslam is very, very good in the wet. The problem with poor old Ron at the moment, they've given the two other Honda riders the four-cylinder bike, and the four-cylinder around Silverstone just has so much more horsepower than the three-cylinder, as you say, Murray. Unless it's wet, then poor Ronnie doesn't stand much of a chance. And if we can get a close-up of the front wheel of Ron Haslam's bike, I should think he's having quite a lot of trouble on fast corners, because the front wheel is bouncing up and down. If you can see, you see when you've got the rough shot of it there, it's bouncing up and down very badly, and that's going to put a lot of weight on the back of the bike. And now you can see very well. It's quite a lot, what you call pattering. And that's extremely difficult around a circuit like Silverstone, because you come into Woodcote at sort of 160 miles an hour, you lean the bike over, and then the front end of the bike starts to chatter very badly. You can see that's a brilliant shot of it there. It's one of the worst things in the world to happen, because what it does, it just transmits all the sort of vibration and wriggling from the front of the bike to the back. So we'll see Ronnie going through here and see if he has any sort of wriggles coming out. Not so bad that time, but as you say, Murray, Ronnie is very much up against it. And I feel sorry for him because he puts his heart and soul into it.
Yes, Ron Haslam's got one or two psychological problems to cope with as well. His brother Terry was tragically killed in a sidecar accident earlier this year. His mother is in hospital with the after effects of a heart attack, and both these things are very much on Ron's mind. But now, with practice well on, it's Spencer leading on practice times, and it looks to me as though Spencer will probably be in amongst this batch. Look for number 4. Well, there's Lawson, and number 2 is Randy Mamola, who is second fastest in practice at the moment. Spencer, 1 minute 29.15, still a second off the lap record. There's nothing significant about that. It doesn't matter whether or not they unofficially break the lap record in practice. You can't officially break it because the lap record has to be set during an actual race. Spencer fastest, 129.15. Mamola second on the Honda, 129.80. Wayne Gardner third, 130.33. Christian Saron on the first Yamaha, fourth, 130.6. Ron Haslam on another Honda, fifth, 130.2.54. Bert van Doelman, who is riding a Honda, in sixth position. And Thierry Espy, who incidentally is French and not Belgian, is seventh fastest, ahead of Rob Punt, the Dutch rider, as we look at Randy Mamola and that distinctive style of his. It always looks to me, Barry, as though Mamola is in acute danger of falling off. He gets so far off the bike on corners.
Well, it's quite strange. I didn't really notice it until I saw a picture of Randy one time with a foot off the footrest. And the next Grand Prix that I rode in, I was following Randy around Anderstorp, which is in Sweden. And I couldn't believe it because he has quite short legs and he just hangs right off the right-hand or the left-hand side of the bike. Consequently, his foot doesn't touch the footrest. It's a unique riding style. Nobody else actually does it. And you can't really see it properly there, but when he's trying in a race, he gets his foot probably 8 or 9 inches off the footrest, which is quite extraordinary.
Freddie Spencer, world champion of 1983, still fastest, 129.15. Have a close look, if you can, at the rear tyre of his machine. You'll notice that these tyres are tremendously wide. Most of the corners at Silverstone are right-handers, and there is a genuine danger, if the course is dry and it's warm tomorrow, that the right-hand side of the tyre will get hotter and therefore stickier than the left-hand side of the tyre. And when you hit the two left-handers, which are Abbey, which is very, very fast indeed, and Chapel Curve, there must be real problems in maintaining the forward progress of the machine.
Well, the thing is, around the left-handers at Silverstone, as you just said, the nice thing is that the heat from the right-hand side of the tyre does soak through. So Abbey Curve is a 150-mile-an-hour left-hand kink, so you're not accelerating as such. You're not trying to put a lot of power through the back wheel because you're already going quick. And Chapel Curve is more or less the same thing, so it's not too bad. The big problem is later on in the race, as you were saying, the right-hand side of the tyre wears so badly that all the rubber that it's worn goes right to the edge of the tyre. So later on in the race, you end up with something that looks a bit like chewing gum on the very edge of the tyre. So during the race, you have to lean the bike over less and less. And then if you get in a situation where you really have to crank the bike over, you accelerate on what is basically chewing gum. So that's why... Oh, and that is exactly what I was just telling you about.
Why are they going so quickly? They're going for positions on the front row of the grid. And although grid positions in a motorcycle Grand Prix are not as significant as they are in a car Grand Prix, and there are far more riders on each row of the grid, they are nevertheless important, if only for psychological reasons. With the first of today's practice sessions completed then, Freddie Spencer leads the grid positions, 128.42. That's a speed of 119.17 miles an hour on his four-cylinder Honda, just outside the lap record. Then, significantly, the two Works Yamahas of leading the World Championship, Eddie Lawson, and the reigning 250 World Champion, Christian Sarron. Fourth position, American Randy Mamola on the Works